Hi, I'm Alice. You can call me Miss T. I'll put my name on the board. For T is for Thornburg, Thorenborough. So the Thor is in your village. Borough means village. Uh, Thorin, I'm not sure. It's Scottish. It's not important. Um, I have a lot of TikTok channels and a lot of YouTube channels, and they each have a different purpose. And so I'm going to tell you about them. On TikTok, I am Living Architecture Lab. On TikTok, I am Living Architecture Lab. That's where I'm gonna make with only trash and recycling, structures that grow food out of the walls, and that's Living Architecture Lab. But on YouTube soy bioedificio. Si prefieres español, yo puedo hablar un poco. Yo tengo un canal de YouTube donde puedo explicar cómo es posible para usar basura solo a crear edificios, estructuras que puede crear comida y medicina de las paredes. So, bioedificios is where in Spanish I post a lot of the stuff that I'm going to be posting on Living Architecture Lab, and on YouTube, Myco Architect. That's MYCO Architect. That bioedificios is where I'm saying basically in Spanish all the stuff that I say on those channels. So all of that ends up a lot of that is using insect respiratory architecture, like exoskeleton, very similar to a fungal grobin you would find on Amazon. But I'm retooling that to make a living architectural form, kind of like a Lego, except like me, it's male and female on all 6 sides, not just male on the top and female on the bottom. It can click together anywhere, baby. So, and it's got these channels where where the blocks connect, there are holes so that it guides the form of a tree or whatever plant is in there, so that it ends up making a forest within whatever structure you build, in the shape of whatever structure you built on the inside of it. And you don't see these trees or hibiscus, willow, whatever, not until they grow big enough that they start sticking branches out of the blocks. And so, point is, there is a way using mushrooms, which are mycelium, the body of the fungus, is symbiotic with trees and crops and medicine, everything that we use. So what that means is we can use mushrooms and trash to make housing for free that grows food and medicine out of the walls. I know I said that. Crear medicina y comida de las paredes. So, I have 100+ channels on YouTube, and I've only been posting on a few lately. So far, I have so much stuff I'm going to be working on. I wanted to snap these before people start talking about them. So I'm at landfill mining. I'm at mushroom box, garden boxes, because I want to make a kind of cardboard box that sandwiches mycelium in the center, so that it's kind of like an Oreo, except it's mushrooms on the inside, it's death on the outside, the interruption of a natural cycle. And so what that can do is when you get your boxes full of bullshit, and you were just gonna throw it away, but now you can fill it with trash and paper and plastic and whatever, and grow oyster mushrooms in that box. And so by breaking part of it, you release the stored liquids and nutrients, and you expose the internal mycelial layer to air. And doing that means it can colonize the cardboard, which is really just sawdust, meaning okay, so yeah, tree falls in the woods, but you couldn't hear it over the logging equipment. And then it gets packed up, shipped across the world in the form of boxes full of bullshit that you didn't need. Interruption of the natural cycle where mycelium supports baby trees. And so those baby trees are now starving because you wanted that paper, me, my paper. So that's what happened. But this interruption of the natural cycle, we can interrupt the interruption, right? We can just take that cardboard and grow mushrooms and do it in the form of a lay-grow block. Like you lay it and it grows, and it's a block, and it's a lay-grow block, not to be confused with Lego blocks, legally distinct, thank you very much, at Lego Blocks. So basically, this is my main goal this year, is take trash and make a garden in your city. Food desert, thing of the past, that's the plan. But in order to make living architecture, what we really need is a water infrastructure, because we don't have that. And well, there is a mushroom architecture movement happening, and has been happening, and it's very interesting. But mostly what people do is they kill it, they grow it, and it makes the form that they wanted. So they've got it, and now they kill it. And I just want to keep it alive, because what we'd have to do is freshwater infrastructure. And the way to do that, or a great way to do that, one way to do that, is we could find a big weedy tree that has reached down into the soil to find the aquifer, to tap the water, get below the water table where the soil is mud, and then the root stays wet. So what we can do is, if the soil is sticky a little bit, if the soil isn't sticky, then we can pour something in it to make it sticky. But if the soil is something like clay, then we don't have to do that. But the point being, we can wrap a chain around the tree, put it on the back of a truck, and drive in circles, yank the tree, make a big cavity where the root system is. So like there's space around the roots, which branch around underground about the size of the tree. You wouldn't believe how big these things can be. And in the desert, they get down like 100 feet. To tap that aquifer, I don't want to rip it, so break it, so make it impossible to pour something in that reaches that aquifer, because the point being, if we get the whole root system out at once, what we can do with that is pour in something absorbent, or what I mean is pour in a liquid that foams and then it solidifies, not like rock, but into something more like a sponge, that like capillary action. Like if you ever had a paper on the table that just the corner got wet into a little puddle, spilled drink, but then the whole paper gets wet. That's capillary action. And the way it works is you have all of these empty spaces in a structure. Like plastic is absorbent because it has all of these empty spaces. So I said plastic. Paper is absorbent because it has all these empty spaces. And so because it has empty spaces, and water is attracted to water, the water fills the space, and then if one cell empties, the next cell is going to fill it, and that drags water from the previous cell, And so that's capillary action. The physics of it are kind of confusing to me, but it works. So we can make capillary wells by pouring in some kind of material that foams and turns into a sponge, replacing the root structure of a big plant that nobody wanted anyway. And so this capillary well structure is, well, it's a big structure. And, you know, I'm hoping that we can do it in just a simple way so that when we pour the stuff in, it just foams and dries at the same time in such a way that it ends up sort of growing out of the hole. Like we fill the hole, and then as it foams and solidifies into like a spongy whatever, that it'll just grow taller and taller and taller out of the thing, you know, spilling into the like this bizarre, like foamy, squishy thing that's always wet because it taps the aquifer, it gets below the water table, and uses capillary action. So, in doing that, we create a capillary well that we can wring out on top, and then it just gets wet again and again and again and again and again and again. We fill a tank again and again and again, and that fills a fountain that sprays it, and big black forms in the middle of the city are interesting terrain, and they're a little bit shitty because that's where the homeless people bathe, and the exotic birds that escape from your friend's house because they're an idiot. Oh, now they reproduce in the park, but they found this in the middle of the city. It's a tropical outlet in the middle of Michigan, a steamy garden. It's black and green and red, yellow, and every color. And that's gonna be fun, but all these things that I make in miniature, they're, I've got two 3D printers, a Prusa XL and a Tronxy More Pro 2, and I've got to assemble the 3D printer. I have to assemble the Prusa. I'm going to do that time-lapse on Living Architecture Lab, Myco Architect, and Bioedificios. All of this will be musically scored, lots of time lapses of me working on computer automated shit, computer assisted design, like ArcGIS, Geographic Information System, study geography because I got ecology, means and methods and plans and ideas. Suddenly geography is relevant to me, so I'm going to study it, learn all about it. Did you know that Ghana has landfills full of clothes? That's awesome. They call it Obrani Wawu, and I use fabrics like cotton specifically because it breathes really well to wrap what I call mycelial sausages, but you can just straight up myceliate the clothes, meaning they turn white, and and they grow mushrooms. So when something myceliates, what it's doing is it takes the mass of what it's growing on and it converts it into microscopic roots, filaments that weave together. And what they look like, to the naked eye is this, just white, just a pure white material, but it's thick. And so cardboard myceliates really well. Sawdust myceliates really well. Mushrooms can eat almost anything depending on the kind of mushroom. So the plan is use it for everything, right? And what I'm doing in the laboratory is basically that. And let's see. So all of these ideas that I talk about, I'm going to be, I said this, but all the ideas that I've been talking about and that I'm going to explain, I'm going to be using my Prusa XL and my Tronxy More Pro 2, these two really expensive 3D printers, to create them in miniature so that I can do proof of concept experiments, prove that this stuff is possible physically, and also get all that data, all the footage of it happening, all the sensor data, all the data that I can, and put it into computers to train AI so that I can deep fake these things so that we can make movies. Science fiction is something I'm really interested in. I have a channel called Prescient Sci-Fi. It's both on YouTube and TikTok, and that's where I talk about things like, that's where I talk about things like biomimetic biotechnology. Your heart is a spiral ribbon, could be spinning capillary centrifugal gravity competing with regular gravity to make the thing pump, because centrifugal gravity is based on spin and it goes out. Regular gravity is based on mass and it goes in. So if the thing is massive enough to have a gravitational field and it's spinning fast enough to reverse it, then that reversing gravitational field goes back and forth. It can oscillate so that the heart pumps. And we're talking about a heart, which is just a spiral ribbon made with asteroid mining somewhere in space. That's like the size of a moon. I mean, I don't know how big it would have to be to do this, to have enough mass to do this. But if it does have enough mass, if it has enough mass that it has a gravitational field, well, we could make a technology that uses that, that basically shifts the internal mass of the thing in order to manipulate its gravitational fields. We could also make it predictive structurally so that what it does as it navigates the cosmos is it represents the cosmos outside on the interior many, many, many times over, translated in different ways so that different passengers, different organisms within its internal ecology are able to navigate them. And in doing so, they either screw up or they do it right and they succeed in navigating this. Either way, they don't die because the thing is taking care of them. But the point being, it can create these scenarios that it expects to encounter, populate them with living things, force them to navigate them, and then watch what they did. And if they screwed up, they do something else. If they did it right, they copy them. The living world copies the organism. So if you put a bee, for example, into an obstacle course, then you have you put a bee into an obstacle course and it navigates it successfully, then the living world, which I described it as sort of your heart, a spiral ribbon rolled up and stuffed with prisms that deliver light throughout the structure, and it's spinning really fast, and the centrifugal gravity is fighting with the the actual gravity, so that the heart pumps. But it could be any living structure. So but point being, like, this thing it could use living beings to pilot it in this very interesting and I think sensible way, which is actually retooling of a living robotic concept that I've been working with, because I think that ants could be used to mine landfills because insects rely on a static respiratory architecture. We breathe, we go. They don't. They've got a whole spiracle that leads to tracheola. What that means is a branching series of tubes that goes throughout the inside of my little ant friend, and a tick to cockroach. Any insect has these holes that open and close and lead to a branching internal architecture, kind of like air vents, but there's space just right so that oxygen and whatever it needs can permeate and get to the internal workings of this thing, and it doesn't need to breathe, but it gets what it needs anyway. And this is very similar to a fungal groping you would buy on Amazon. So we can take that and use it for living architecture, but we can also retool it for living robotics and mine landfills. If we build a landfill, a miniature like Star Wars, like it's proportionate, you can't tell the difference on a camera, and we set up cameras, lots of them, and right next to each other we got the footage, and it does what we needed, 'cause we replaced what we wanted, the plastic and computer chip, aluminum, cardboard deposit, whatever it is that we're interested in. We replaced it with what the ants need, and it's scaled so that the ants will dig through this tiny little representation of our environment, of the real world, the real landfill. The thing is exactly the same, just miniature. And the ants can dig through this to find the molasses that we have replaced the real life deposit of plastic with in this tiny representation where there are computer chips that we need, or where there's this huge deposit of aluminum, or whatever it is. We've replaced that with like beef or tofu or whatever, the molasses, honey from the beehives that we've got, whatever it is. We replace it with something that the ants want, and they will dig through and find that, and we get all the footage of it. And because it's this movie model, basically, we can use that footage and just give it to our robot ants that are full of myceliating trash with their respiratory architecture that it's basically exactly the same as ants, except plastic, cardboard, and junk and trash on the inside, and they're growing mushrooms and trees and whatever can sprout out of them. Point being, we take our robotic ants that are based on the real ants, and we make them do just what the little one did, and that will take us straight to what we needed. Dig a tunnel, and because our robots are made of mycelium, and it's a walking garden that gardens and builds architecture that is in the same form. They could even leave their forms right there and detach detach the robotic component. That's an interesting way to build if you've got living architecture inside of your robotic, hyper-symbiotic stewardship engine, the mech soldier, the ant builder, this thing that's more capable than you want to think about it. Well, these ants, they can do so much for the world. Anyway, point being, we can pilot them with the little ones, the real ones, and if they just hold their hands and then detach their robotic component, then we've made a circle. Right? I kind of trailed off there, but the point being, like, one way to build, like, they can of course use their robot bodies to build things, but they could also, because they are living architecture, they can just position themselves where they want it and then detach the components that are moving and leave it there. And, let's say they all get in a circle and hold their hands, detach the robotic components. You have made a circular wall out of living architecture, and the thing will grow trees throughout and whatever. So that same concept, using ants to pilot a landfill mining engine, that can be retooled for a living spaceship that, creates an internal or many internal microcosmos sort of things that are translated to its biological passengers, and so that they can navigate them, and then that translation scheme is employed, right? We've predicted where the thing is going to end up, what situation it will be in the cosmos. It doesn't know what to do, so it's gonna create a miniature representation of that situation that is translated to each living thing on board, so that each living thing has the opportunity to navigate this maze and give the thing information about how it should operate. So that's way deep in the future type stuff, but this is the sort of thing that we can deep fake. We can deep fake this. And speaking of deep fakes, coming back to I'm making models of everything. I've got a channel called Geo Models that I haven't posted anything on yet. These models that I'm making, if I make a model river system like the size of my grandma's garage, or I got a few friends who have ranches, so maybe one of them will let me do it somewhere, and then bring like an above ground pool to represent the ocean, so that this model river system, model geography, hydrology, translated ecology in that way, this river system pours fresh water and silt into the ocean representation, creating a plume, much like a real river does. And that plume in the real world, it just goes and swirls around and feeds the ocean and then sinks to the ground. But what I want to do is capture it in a cellular form that's floating, a ring of icebergs made of plastic water bottles rooted around with mangroves and sea grasses, so you can't see the plastic, protected from friction and ultraviolet radiation, the two things that make microplastics. That's friction and ultraviolet radiation. We protect our plastic iceberg with mangroves, and it fills a bowl with fresh water and then silt, and aerosolizes silt and supports floating Chinampo's ancient garden technique. And floating garden island nation, and a labyrinth neat research station, whale communication. It's a sanctuary fertilized by bird shit and know how beautiful it could be, stretching across the whole sea with spider web looking Garden Island Nation, Garden Island Nation, Garden Island Nation, Garden Island Nation. Like the Seychelles method I used to say, it's a small island chain, but it's a grand island nation. So we want to make something that it extends lakes and rivers and fresh water and nutrition out into the sea. And this seasteading is becoming popular. And anyway, these forms, which could snake along coastlines, so those ones don't even need flotation, as well as spreading out through the ocean, and that could deliver fresh water and silt to a depression. Like, for example, the Nile pours into the Mediterranean. Well, it could pour into a system that snakes along the North African coast, makes landfall, and all that nutrition feeds organelles that aerosolize all the silt, which is what the Sahara does, and all that nutrition blows across the Atlantic, feeds the Canary Islands, and falls on the Amazon, which is why the Amazon is Sahara colored, because it literally is the Sahara. So we can use this to green the Sahara, turn it into a garden, and aerosolize way more silt, way more nutrition than the Sahara ever did, making the Amazon thrive rather than, collapse, which it would if we just greened the Sahara without aerosolizing nutrition. This year, I'm going to be doing a lot with projectiles. And it's kind of like an evil wizard was like, I'm just gonna convince the world that only evil projectiles are possible. Nothing good, only hurtful, harmful, pain, bullets, and electrocution, insane. I pull the trigger, don't let go. Ha 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 ha. And poison dart make you sleep, and it's in my eyes, I can't see it. Ooh, 50 caliber.